Welcome to It's a Lunch Date with Athletes and Artists. During this live episode, our host, Drew Jones, sits down with licensed psychologists, the Mental Health Sistas. Tune in to learn about the hows, whats, and whys of mental health. Get ready, because it's a lunch date with the Mental Health Sistas.
So can you start by telling us a little bit about your background, what interested you in the mental health industry, and why you started the Mental Health Sistas?
Yes. Okay. So my sister and I are both licensed psychologists working in sunny and rainy South Florida. And basically, we started the Mental Health Sistas just because we noticed a few things in our community that were lacking, specifically, even though there were a lot of providers out there providing psychological services, therapy, testing, and so on and so forth. There were quite a few times where the services were not culturally competent. You know, they weren't necessarily keeping a person's ethnic, racial, or cultural background in mind. And then we also noticed that there were some disparities between who had access to certain services. So we created the Mental Health Sistas because we wanted to make sure that not only we provided effective services to the people we serve, but that we would also provide culturally competent services to ensure that everybody has access to the same resources.
And what has your experience been like so far, going a little bit deeper with the cultural significance of a human being? Because people bring their experiences with their entire being. So what has your experience been like focusing on the cultural significance?
Yes, I would definitely say the culture plays a huge role, just because a lot of times when you know someone's culture, or if you're even familiar with it, it can explain a lot of things that otherwise you just doing psychology or therapy you wouldn't pick up on. So it could be cultural norms and values. It could be understanding what is the best way to approach this issue. You know, if the person has a problem with boundary setting, are they from an individualistic culture like the US? Are they from a collectivistic culture where it's all about family? You may want to approach that particular problem a different way. So one of the things that we think is important is recognizing not only the person's cultural background. If you can learn more about their culture, definitely do that on your free time, but also don't be afraid to ask questions to clarify, to learn more about the client so that they recognize I'm not just a number sitting in your office, but I'm actually someone that you care about and that you are willing to put in the work to figure out the best way to serve me and meet my needs.
And, we have a lot going on in the world right now.
Oh, yeah.
A viral pandemic, a racial pandemic.
Hello.
Welcome.
I was like,
hey, sister. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick before I get into the next question?
Sure. Okay, so my name is Dr. Josie. I usually go by Dr. Joe for short. I don't know exactly what information to share, but I do psychological testing, I do therapy, and I also do coaching services. So basically, all of my services are provided from a culturally competent perspective because I feel like that's really important, especially right now in the climate that we're in. Mm-hmm. And I also do research that's geared towards that area as well. So
your family must be so proud of you guys, not just one doctor, but two in the family.
Yeah.
Well, we're just kind of diving into the fact that we're in a viral pandemic, a racial pandemic, an economic recession. There's a lot going on right now. So how can people cope with what's going on? What are good tips, and I don't want to say tips and tricks, but what are good ways that we can overcome what's going on right now?
Right. I don't know if you've already said this or if you've already discussed this, but I think one of the main things that we really have to focus on is self-care. I think that can get neglected sometimes, especially as you get caught up in everything and you want to contribute some way, somehow, whether it's to helping those who have COVID or kind of helping people deal with the pandemic, as well as if it has to do with racial injustice and you're trying to protest or do different posts or videos on these topics. Sometimes we get overwhelmed and we don't notice it. And then there's actually a concept we refer to as activism burnout. So it's like while you're doing all of these different things, you're not replenishing your cup And eventually you're not able to do much of anything anymore because you are just completely burnt out. So that to me is important.
Yeah, I definitely think the self-care is an important one. One of the things that I've also been telling a lot of people, you have to recognize that your emotions and your feelings exist for a reason. So if you are feeling sad, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling angry, or if you recognize that you're not feeling like your normal self, that is providing you with useful information that either something internally or externally is not right and that you need to address it. So I always tell people that your feelings and emotions are almost like your body's smoke detector. If you are feeling angry, sad, or depressed, your body is letting you know something is wrong.
Right.
So in the same sense, when a smoke detector goes off, we don't grab a bat and, tear it to pieces. We actually go around the house to try to figure out what's going on. Why is this going off? Same thing goes for our emotions. So if you're feeling burnt out, depressed, angry, anxious, or whatever it is, asking yourself, what is going on either internally or externally that I need to address so that I can start to feel better?
And self-care is obviously extremely important, as you guys mentioned. There's little things that we could do at home, digital detoxing, meditation, et cetera, et cetera. But what would you guys say is the point at which we need to actually seek professional help? When do you think that it's going beyond self-care for some people?
Go ahead.
What I was going to say is sometimes we may be feeling badly and we kind of feel like we're still functional. But if you start to notice that it is actually leading not just to psychological symptoms, but also physiological symptoms. So common complaints that I'm hearing right now are insomnia. People are having a hard time falling and staying asleep. Right. Muscle tension. People are complaining, I have tenseness in my neck or in my shoulders or in my back, and I'm not sure where it's coming from. Headaches, stomach aches, heart racing, and so on and so forth. Chances are, if you're not addressing the psychological emotions as soon as they pop up, it's going to manifest in your body. So I would say that is one of the good indicators that it might be time for you to reach out for psychological help.
I would also just add that just when you notice there's a departure from your daily functioning, that also signals, okay, we might have to get help for this, because sometimes we see ourselves in a particular way and we don't recognize that means that we're kind of on the level of depletion, in the sense that maybe you're usually able to get up and just shower and get going and go about your day, but you're finding that with each passing day, you can't get out of bed. You can't do certain things that you normally used to do. Your productivity at work, if you go, is poor. Or let's say if you have children, you can't deal with them, or you're always trying to avoid them. You're trying to avoid coming home. You don't want to deal with the everyday hassles of life. So it's almost like the way that you normally function, it's not happening that way. I think that that's a great marker or indicator of when you need to seek further help. And by that, I don't necessarily just mean, general productivity. I mean your personal productivity, because there is a way where you can be functionally depressed, for instance. So it's like you're depressed, but you're still able to go to work and go to school or do whatever it is that you do. But the level at which you do it is not the same in terms of your usual productivity. And I think we need to know ourselves well enough to pay attention to those factors, so that when we see ourselves kind of falling off and feeling like, I can't get out of bed today, I don't know why, but I can't get through this assignment, or I usually can just get up and go, but for some reason I just want to stay in bed. We kind of have to start asking ourselves those questions of if we need clinical help or not.
And I know in multiple families, communities, everywhere out there in the world, that there are people that feel that getting help with their mental health, getting mental health care, is stigmatized.
Right.
So how can we more normalize mental health care and just talking to somebody? How can we, everyday people, normalize and destigmatize getting help?
I think it's important to point out that the point that you just brought up is also tied to the cultural significance that you mentioned earlier, The reality is, in certain cultures, there's even more of a stigma where there is this belief that if you seek help, you're crazy, you should just pray, or you should just go to church or synagogue or whatever else it is. I think one of the things that we can do to kind of address the stigma is normalizing and validating mental health issues, mental health needs, and so on and so forth. So, for example, if you have experience with therapy, feeling comfortable to say, I've seen a therapist in the past when I was depressed, or when I was going through a divorce, or when I was having a rough time. Also, when we talk to people in positions of leadership, encouraging them to also do their part to talk about the stigma with regards to mental health, and recognizing that mental health is healthcare. So in the same sense that it is important for you to go to a doctor for an annual physical checkup, same thing goes for your mental health, because when your mental health is affected, it affects your ability to do anything else. So letting people know and understand that this is a normal thing. There is nothing wrong with you if you feel the need to see a therapist, or to go to talk to someone outside of your family or your religious base, and recognizing it's okay, and then sharing information as you have access to it with regards to therapy and how it can benefit people.
I think what's nice is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to kind of reiterate what she said, in the sense that, I think that that's important to do. I feel like as if there's only one other thing that I think I would add, and that's that everyone has mental health. That's the first thing people need to remember. Just like everyone has physical health, everyone has mental health. And just like anyone who's physically healthy can get sick, anyone who's mentally healthy can experience a break in that mental health or experience mental illness. I think once we start categorizing it as everyone, rather than saying those people, or they're crazy, or they're this, or they're that, it'll help us be more accepting of different mental health conditions and seeking help for those conditions, because we all have it. We all have, we all have a mind, and we can all, quote unquote, lose our mind, as some people would like to put it. So I think once you see everyone is in the same boat, it helps it be less stigmatizing for other people.
Very true.
And I think it's amazing now we're seeing, prominent athletes, celebrities coming out and saying, hey, this is something that I experienced and I went and got help and now I'm doing a lot better. So seeing it in mainstream media, I think, is helping kind of normalize everything for our communities as well.
Right.
Agreed.
So I also wanted to kind of touch on social media specifically, because I feel like we can compare ourselves to others, compare ourselves to influencers. At what point do we need to all put down the phone?
I would actually suggest that all of us need to put down the phone, from time to time. So don't make it a thing where you're doing social media chronically 365 days a year. Actually set aside time either every day or every week where you are just going to, as you said earlier, detox from technology. Because the reality is, when we're on social media 24/7, most people on social media are posting highlight reels of their life. I'm at a fancy hotel in Cancun. I just went to this restaurant on Las Olas near the beach, or I just got engaged, or just found out I'm pregnant. So if, let's say, you are in a transition point in your life or you don't have that much going on, you can really start to feel like as if you're the one who is left out. You're the one who is not getting a chance to actually have fun or do big things. So it's important to recognize, what? If I'm starting to feel drained, if I'm starting to feel depressed, if I'm starting to feel inferior, if I'm starting to feel like as if, only bad things happen to me and good things happen to everybody else, that to me is one of the main indicators that you need to take a step back and kind of reorient yourself so that you don't inadvertently make yourself sick.
Yeah, and I think that no comparison rule is important, because I think sometimes you compare in a way that's it's not a fair comparison, because you don't see what goes on behind the scenes. Sometimes you may think that someone's got it way better than they actually do. Other times you may be at a certain point that's further back than someone else, but it's only because that person has invested much more time in a particular thing. Like, you don't know how many hours they stayed up, you don't know how many hours they studied or whatever it is that they're doing, or let's say it's business wise, you don't know how much of an investment they've put into that business. Maybe they're at a farther stage, but you're at a beginning stage, and that's why there's that huge disparity there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get there or you can't be in that place, but it's more so something for you to aspire to rather than looking at something to compare yourself to. And I think that's where we make that mistake. So I think this all kind of goes back to having that level of self-awareness. You have to notice certain things about yourself and how you're reacting to things, and you have to be honest with yourself, in the sense that if I notice I'm looking at things, and instead of wanting to aspire to be that, or feeling like, you know what, I can't wait till I get there one day, instead you find yourself feeling down and, you know, comparing yourself and feeling like you're left behind, at that point you need to know, okay, I need to put down the phone, because the way that I'm looking at it is not in a way that's beneficial for me. And not only may that hinder your productivity, it can also impact your mental health, because you're feeling very poorly about yourself.
I would actually.
And I know.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was going to piggyback off of what my sister said. A lot of times people don't recognize, if you compare your beginning to someone else's middle, you'll feel worse about yourself. So you never know where a person is. You might see someone who is the same age as you, same race, same ethnic background, you guys went to the same school, you guys graduated to the same time, but their life journey is not your life journey. So if you're constantly comparing yourself to them and feeling like you don't measure up, you may not even recognize maybe that they're in the middle, lower end of their life and you're still at the beginning. So stop getting into the habit of feeling the need to compare yourself to other people, and recognize the only person you should be comparing yourself to is the person you were yesterday. So you always want to be striving to be better with each day. Make yourself the goal as opposed to everybody else.
Sorry about
And
that.
I think, oh, no worries. You guys are busy and well liked and wanted, I'm sure. But you know, I was just curious, because not everybody is self-aware. So how can we become more self-aware? Is there, you know, maybe like a 5-question checklist that we should kind of like note to self every week? How do we become more self-aware?
I would say one way, of course, is obvious: therapy. So there are a lot of times when people come into therapy, one of the main things that I've noticed is there are certain things they're just not aware about themselves, but the people around them in their life are very much aware, but they're not saying anything. So when you have a therapist who you know is on your side, who is supportive, who is non-judgmental, who validates and affirms you, they can help you to kind of recognize those things that are in your blind spot that you're not necessarily picking up on. So therapy definitely is one thing. Another thing that you can do, and this is dependent on the quality of your friendships, is actually asking people around you, are there things about me that you've noticed that you think that, you know, it's not within my awareness, or it's something that you think that I could work on? That is something that has helped me personally, where I'll ask like my sister, my brother, my girlfriends, you know, is there something about me that you've noticed that you do think that I need to work on? And sometimes they'll say things and I'm like, what are you talking about? But then it turns out that they're right. It was something in my blind spot that I couldn't see. So those are just 2 things that I can think of off the top of my head. I don't know if you wanted to add something.
I think what she said was dead on. Like there's always this there's this concept. I think it's like the Johari window, if I'm not mistaken. But it's almost like there's a part of you that's hidden to both you and other people around you. So that part is going to be hard to tackle regardless. There's a part that only you are aware of. So that's going to require you to be honest with yourself about certain things that you notice. There are things that only other people will notice it about you. It's in your blind spot, so they're going to have to tell you. And then there are the things that both you and other people notice. So I feel like the ways that you develop self-awareness kind of depends on where it falls within that window. And I think that she already provided some good tips in terms of kind of asking people around you, about different things. You have to kind of do your own self-appraisal. And now that you mentioned, I actually wish there was kind of something like that, or maybe we'll work on a checklist or some sort or whatever, where you can actually kind of ask yourself certain questions. But I think the most important part is being comfortable enough to be honest with yourself about your flaws. I think that a lot of people don't feel comfortable seeing the truth about themselves. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. Everyone has strengths, everyone has weaknesses, everyone has things that are great about them, and everyone has flaws. And it's okay. And I think that going to therapy in that sense can help a lot, because a therapist helps you to accept yourself wholly, so that you're not accepting parts and then kind of keeping other parts under the rug, because if you're keeping it under the rug, we can never address it. So I think that self-awareness will come when you feel comfortable being accepting of yourself, flaws and all. And not only will that help you to become more self-aware, it will help you connect to other people, because once you accept yourself fully, it will make it possible for other people to accept you fully. But just think about it. If you know yourself and you can't accept yourself, chances are you're going to think no one else can accept you, because you can't even accept you.
Yep.
So I think it's very important for that self-awareness, if we decide to ourselves, you know, we're going to accept ourselves, flaws and all, so that we can see our blind spots, and then other people can connect with us on a deeper level.
So true.
And last question for you ladies. I'm curious. So not everybody is going to mesh well with a specific therapist, right? So what are ways that we can vet people that we're trying to talk to and actually find somebody that we can work well with?
That is a great question. That's actually something that my sister and I have talked about before. Sometimes people will just look for a therapist and go with the first one that they find. But we actually encourage people, you know, ask around, use websites such as psychologytoday.com, therapyforblackgirls.com, therapyforblackmen.org. Use all of those resources, filter it, you know, if you want male versus female, if you want a specific religious background, if you want a specific orientation, find out if the psychologist or therapist that you're interested in offers a free consultation. So some psychologists or therapists will actually give you 15 to 30 minutes of their time to just talk to them about your presenting problem. And a lot of times during that conversation, you can get a sense of whether you would gel well with that person, or whether their behavior is off-putting, or maybe it's just not a good match for you. Another thing that we would recommend is ask around. So ask people that you know, are you familiar with this therapist? Do you have any experience with Dr. Smith or Dr. Doe? And then also looking at reviews online. So basically making sure that you are kind of dotting all of your I's and crossing all of your T's, so that you find the right fit. Because what a lot of people don't recognize, they've actually done studies to figure out what makes therapy effective. And the factor that plays the biggest role is the therapist-client relationship. So some people have said to me, I've been in therapy before, but it's never been like this. It's not that therapy was bad. It's that they didn't have a good client-therapist fit. So that's super important.
Yeah, I think she covered most of the areas that I would say. I feel like word of mouth is one of the most important, because it's coming from someone you know. But the other thing I would also suggest is, while you're doing your research, because I feel like that's an important piece, I would also say be open. Because sometimes we may think we're closed off to a particular therapist, but it's that we're closed off to therapy. And because we're closed off to therapy, we think it's kind of like everyone you talk to, you find a reason to be like, no, it's not a good fit. No, I spoke to her, but no, I don't think so. No, I don't know what it is, but something about so-and-so just didn't sound right. Sometimes it's kind of like our not being open to therapy that is playing out in every conversation, so that we're not actually able to measure gel with someone. So I do want to say, in that sense, be open. Don't necessarily make a decision right off the bat about the person. I think the consultations are also key. There are certain things where you may not know from a consultation, but there are certain like deal breakers or things that might come out where you're like, whoa, no, I absolutely know this is not a good fit. And then I also want to say, once you start therapy and you're in a couple of sessions, your therapist has now built rapport. They're going to start going into things that are a little bit more intense. At the first challenge from your therapist, don't just say, I'm not going back to that therapist anymore because she said blah, 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 blah. Part of therapy is challenging certain things. It is challenging certain beliefs. It's challenging certain experiences. It's challenging certain relationships. So you have to be open to that challenge. As long as there's not something that's blatantly, out there where it's like, oh, wow, that was so disrespectful or that was not clinically sound, I would say give it a shot, because maybe the interplay that, let's say if you're experiencing relationship problems, maybe that interplay of what you normally experience is now playing out when you're therapist. And the therapist's job is to create a new experience for you so that in future relationships, you also have a new experience. So I would just say, don't be too quick to cut it off, or don't necessarily cut off every therapist you speak to, but really look deep down inside and see, is there a reason why I'm avoiding going to therapy? Or is there a reason why what the therapist said impacted me so hard? And talk to the therapist about it. That's something you can process.
I would also add to what you just said. Sometimes we may also judge a therapist when we first meet them if they're not what we were expecting. So I have had clients in the past who walked into the office, signed, their name down, and then I came to get them for the first time, and you can see they're kind of taken aback. And it's like, I don't know if it's because I look younger than they expect, or maybe even race sometimes can play a part. But if you give that person a chance, as my sister said, for one session or a couple of sessions, you can figure out, is this someone who is going to be good for my mental health? If yes, then you stay. Is this someone who is going to provide a corrective experience, or they're going to challenge me in constructive ways? Also, I would recommend staying there. And then also, if it doesn't work out, there is no shame in you saying, you know what, I want to try someone else.
Mm-hmm. It's just like getting a second opinion. Like if you have a medical diagnosis, you don't always go with the first doctor you go to. Sometimes you say, I want a second opinion, and you go to somebody else. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yep.
Right. We need to treat our mental health just like our physical health, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much, doctors, for joining me today. I really, really appreciated learning from you and getting to talk to you. Can you tell us where everybody can find you?
Yes, definitely. You can follow us on our IG page at the Mental Health Sistas. That's Sistas, Sistas. And then you can also follow me on my page at Dr. Diona. That's DRDYONA.
And I'm at Dr. Joe _PhD. That's DRJO _PhD.
And definitely subscribe to our YouTube. The link is in our bio.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Forgot about it, but that's it's the same. The mentalhealthsisters.com.
Yes.
Awesome. Definitely we'll check out your website and your YouTube channel. It's so nice to meet you, Dr. Diona and Dr. Joe. Thank you again for joining us today.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having us.